May 6th, 1993.
Tonight, a kind of letter from a young woman who spent a year in hell.
I used to explain it like you're drowning.
For 14 months, PrimeTime documented her battle with a disease a lot of people don't really understand: anorexia.
That's not so simple as eating. It has nothing really to do with food.
She's actress Tracy Gold, and tonight we'll bring you her story from the moments of darkness.
I saw myself actually dying of it.
To the days of hope.
For decades, they were silent. But now, as adults, the orphans of Quebec are coming forward.
And they would strap little girls with electrical cords right here.
The head monitor raped me in the cell.
They broke my life.
Tonight, charges that in the 1940s and 50s, the Catholic Church labeled thousands of normal children mentally retarded and systematically terrorized, abused, and perhaps even murdered youngsters.
Sister, how far did this discipline go?
Last week, PrimeTime investigated the cozy relationship between members of Congress and Washington lobbyists.
You don't consider that a vacation?
No.
Now, a development that makes you wonder if the folks on Capitol Hill have finally gotten the message.
I think you'll see fewer of these gifts exchanged, and I think that's all for the better.
Finally, she's a legend in Chicago, right up there with Michael Jordan and Oprah. She's the mother of all radio talk show hosts, and that's not all. Tonight, Judd Rose tells you who she is and why she's so special.
From ABC News, with anchors Diane Sawyer in New York, Sam Donaldson in Washington, Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace, Judd Rose, Jay Shadler, Sylvia Chase, John Quinones, and Renee Poussaint, this is Prime Time. Prime Time, now from New York, Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. The young woman you're about to meet could well be your daughter, your granddaughter, your wife, your friend. 8 million Americans suffer from eating disorders, 90% of them women. And the one called anorexia nervosa is a complicated web of fear and compulsion that you can only fight your way out of meal by meal, day by day, as you'll learn tonight. Because more than a year ago, we asked television actress Tracy Gold if she wanted to keep a kind of diary of her battle with this illness. She consulted with her family and therapist and said if it would help other girls see the desperate trap, she'd do it on one condition. We could only air the report when she felt she was on her way back. So tonight, Tracy Gold's memoir of a brave year in a very personal war. She was the sweet realization of Hollywood's favorite dream. A baby-faced child star with a lot of talent lucks into a hit TV show at the age of 16. For 7 years, everyone knew her as Carol Seaver, the bookish, reliable kid sister on Growing Pains. But when Tracy Gold finally hit the cover of People magazine, it was not about her stardom. It was anorexia. There are people who absolutely insist that it's just a little vanity, a little attention getting, and you could just snap out of it if you would.
And I'll guarantee you, any one of those people has never, ever had anorexia. Because if you've gone through what I've gone through, you would know that's not so simple as eating. It has nothing really to do with food.
As she struggled, it didn't help that her adolescence and the few extra pounds that came with it were turned into a running gag on TV.
What's the matter? I'm not fat enough for you?
Oh, no, you're plenty. No, come on, you don't.
She sometimes went home in tears.
I called the producers. I'd say, you got to take it out. I can't rehearse with it. It's hurting me, and I have a real problem with this, and maybe I'm oversensitive to it. Maybe it's funny, but I'm not finding it funny.
She finally found a doctor who put her on a radical diet. We all watched as her weight dropped from 133 pounds to 112, but she couldn't stop. At 5'3" her dress size was less than 1. She had bronchitis. She says her blood pressure would drop 40 points when she stood up. She was exhausted. The producers insisted she take a leave from the show and get help.
I really made it a point that I don't want to blame anybody for my own problems, it was me who, you know, developed anorexia, and it was because of my own inside issues.
What inside issues, what puzzle of feelings could possibly lead a young woman like Tracy Gold to stop eating? Her career was great. Her family is extremely close. Well, doctors say every puzzle is different, but the search for a key has to begin with shifting the focus away from food and onto relationships with the world and with people around you, especially for young women who haven't found their independence, who are eager to please.
Singer Karen Carpenter died in 1983 after a syrup she'd been using to induce vomiting damaged her heart. But there are countless others who live with the illness, women whose names we don't recognize, though we see their bodies in the magazines.
I used to explain it like you're drowning, and my hand was reaching above the surface, and I was just trying to get somebody to help me. And the hardest thing with this disease is that there's no real cure.
And so we began documenting this struggle for help on March 13th, 1992, 2 months after Tracy took a leave from the show. She comes to this first interview all covered up in layers, a familiar disguise for anorexics. The dark circles under her eyes are because she has a hard time sleeping. She now weighs 93 pounds.
So hard. It's like you guys coming here today. I'll be honest with you. A huge part of me just want to say, no, I don't want to be Tracy Gold anorexic today. I just want to be Tracy Gold.
Her face is deceiving. Her cheeks are full, but for a gauge of the physical toll. Look at the difference in her arms near her top weight on growing pains. And here, 40 pounds lighter. Like most anorexics, she's hungry, an encyclopedia of food, obsessed with eating and denial.
I had a cup of cereal, breakfast, and a cup of cereal for lunch. And that's, it's a cup is 100 calories. And less than, well, it's like 1 gram of fat. An apple has no fat.
Because of her weakness, she has trouble concentrating. She has an eerie clarity about the disease, its risks, its unhealthy pleasures.
I go to a nutritionist, and she told me I have to be careful because if I were in a car accident or something, like, I don't have like a lot of, because I don't have fat, I don't have muscle also, protecting like all my organs and stuff. There's a sense of frailty, that there's a security in that, because you're taken care of and protected, because you look frail and breakable. And I get cold easily. I'm not really a comfortable body to be in right now, physically, but emotionally, it's my security blanket.
After our interview, she returns to the set of Growing Pains to tape the sentimental final episode. One of the final scenes is a family gathering around a pizza. Watch carefully. She just pretends to chew.
I just watched the tape recently, actually. It looks really phony. Oh, my God.
It is now May 16th, 1992, her birthday.
I am 23 today.
Behind the cheerfulness of this day is a family strained to the breaking point by her compulsions, her rituals, the ones she doesn't want to record on tape. She chain drinks tea and Diet Coke to control her appetite. Her weight is stable in the low 90s, but she only eats if family members are watching, and the same thing every night, a little dry pasta, chicken microwaved until it's like parchment. Anything else, like oil or butter, she panics, or she sneaks off to throw up and take laxatives.
She never laughed. She never had fun. She had terrible mood swings. It was horrible.
It's just very, very hard to watch it.
Bonnie Gold and Harry Gold are not just parents. They're also Tracy's manager and agent. They have been by her side, protecting her every step of her career. including on growing pains.
You okay? Yeah.
They say the producers called to ask that Tracy diet, and as gently as they could, they gave her the news.
We tried to go about it in the most healthy way possible. We consulted with her doctor.
The nature of the industry. If she's going to be a leading lady, she has to be thin.
Yeah.
So you don't exercise at all?
No, not right now.
Tracy is the oldest of 5 sisters. But despite her financial success, she never wanted to leave home. She lives in the little guest house across the pool from her parents. Her father, Harry, had the hardest time understanding anorexia. The Goals had captured the aftermath of one of Harry's explosions on their home video. Tracy and her parents are going out to a party.
And you blame me for being upset?
Yes, because you know that she's sick. And you know she has to be told, if you ask her, do you want to eat, Tracy? Have you eaten? And she says no, you know she will eat. If she wanted to, she could have told you she did eat. She didn't have to tell you the truth. You're like a crazy man here, Harry.
But how could I not be upset?
Because you know she's sick. You know she's got a problem. With this long enough to know. She's very emotional.
But do you know how hard this is on a father?
You really thought she might die?
That possibility was there.
I literally used to go in and check her pulse at night, check her heartbeat, see that she was breathing. I could imagine the morning she didn't wake up.
It is now June 10th, 6 months into her battle with anorexia. Her weight hasn't improved. She's baking a cake for her boyfriend.
It's going to be a yellow cake with purple icing.
One of the quirks of anorexia is a vicarious delight in feeding others. She won't let herself take even one bite because in her mind she's just an ounce away from obesity and ridicule. As always, she talks endlessly about the food she doesn't eat.
And they had hors d'oeuvres first, and all these incredible looking hors d'oeuvres, like, you know, shrimp scampi and calamari and all this stuff that, like, normally I would love.
She says her moods are getting darker, crankier. Her menstruation is sporadic. She's in therapy 3 times a week exploring her life, but she hasn't found the keys.
I'm not as far along as I thought I was going to be. My doctor keeps telling me, Tracy, I told you it was going to be long. And I'm like, I just thought that it was going to be so much easier than this.
Everybody has gotten caught up in the anorexic loop.
Her mother, Bonnie, has acknowledged that she had a bout with bulimia in the past. That's binging and throwing up. She recalls that Tracy had a brief episode of anorexia when she was 12 and ponders what role her parenting might have played.
Do I feel I'm to blame for this? No.
Her sister Missy has just taken Tracy on a weekend trip. Tracy's rituals and demands made it a nightmare.
I said to her last night, I said, Tracy, there has got to come a point when you get tired of this, because we're all tired of it.
June 25th, a home video of the family on vacation in Hawaii. With them, Tracy's boyfriend, Robbie Marshall, a film production assistant.
You can't feel sexual. You can't feel pretty. There's no way you're going to feel good. It's uncomfortable. There were times I couldn't sleep. I couldn't lie down.
I call her Bones. You know, that's my nickname for her. And she's like a skeleton sometimes, like when she doesn't lay right on my shoulder or something, and she gets cold all the time now, and she's unhappy in that body, and she's trapped.
It's now months later, and something is wrong. All of a sudden, Tracy won't see us anymore. We schedule meetings, she cancels. Only later do we learn what happened. During the summer, Tracy had a serious setback. She had managed to build her weight up to 95 pounds, but then one day, when she saw that number on the scale, she panicked and stopped eating. Her weight plummeted to 83 pounds. That's 50 pounds lighter than where she started.
I would lie if it came down to it, you know? You ask me, did you throw up today, Tracy? No. Did you eat today, Tracy? Yes, of course I ate. I would swear on my life that I ate, knowing that I hadn't eaten.
Doctors say at some point the chemistry in the brain can change and you actually lose your will to fight. One night, Tracy Gold felt she was standing at that point of no return.
I looked in the mirror, and I didn't have any clothes on, and I was scared. I mean, for the first time, I was scared.
What did you see?
I saw what I saw in pictures of people that I've seen die of anorexia. So that's what scared me. I saw myself actually dying of it. You know, I was a skeleton. I would like move and I would get a bruise, a big, I went to the doctor because I had all these like bumps like all along my hip area, big bumps. After that, you know, I did this tape for you guys. And I talked this big talk about I was going to get to 100 pounds.
I thought to myself last night, I said, Tracy, you're 5'3", 100 pounds, you're thin, you'd still be small, you'd still be little.
She gave that little dissertation about how she's going to put on weight, she's going to do this and that and whatever, which the minute the camera went off, she didn't do.
It took time, but she
Yeah, it took time. I mean, it was the beginning of something.
The beginning of a way back. Fear had opened a door which therapy could move through. We saw her next, January 19th, 1993. She tells us she's on an antidepressant Prozac, and she's even eaten her first regular pasta at a restaurant. She's back up to 92 pounds.
My next thing is to do the lunch thing. We got the dinner thing down, and I love my dinner. I look forward to it.
She tells us she thinks she's ready to work again. She also wants to get married, but Robbie has put a condition on his proposal.
Because we can't get married until I know you'll be able to eat a piece of cake at our wedding. I'm almost there. I'm almost to that point where I could do it and not feel like so scared.
It is now April 19th, 1993, our final interview. She is amazed as we look back at the tapes of the year, her journey of fear, obsession, denial.
You know, shrimp scampi and calamari and all this stuff that, like, normally I would love.
I just think, like, when I watch that, like, how obsessed I am about talking about the food.
Physically, she's now holding steady at 93 pounds. Emotionally, it's clear she's come a long way.
What have you learned?
I think I've learned to have a lot more confidence in myself and what I have to say. I always used to be, you know, afraid to voice my opinion.
She says she now sees that the family embrace that gave her so much protection was in fact squeezing her far too tightly. Being a TV star only added to her insecurity. So the anorexia wasn't about being thin, but staying childlike and protected. And when she wanted, having a weapon of control.
So it's a strange power game, too.
Oh, yeah. The fear would be like, you're not going to make me eat that. You're not going to make me taste that. I can't. And, you know, either it be my father or my boyfriend, who most I think would be the ones, and my mom.
Too close?
Too close. Too close. On both ends.
Absolutely. I think not only was I too involved, but I was too controlling. And I will be the first one to admit that.
You know, there's been a change in you, too.
There's been a realization of exactly what happened and exactly what went on.
People sitting at home say, stage mother.
No. No. From the outside, it would look like a stage mother, I'm sure. It's just our personalities. And it's healthy for us now because, you know, we're kind of learning to be friends and mother and daughter.
Here we go.
So Tracy Gold is now well enough to work again. She's made a new TV movie, Labor of Love, which airs this Sunday, about a young woman who wants a baby and her mother who carries it for her.
I don't want to be a quitter.
A public comeback for the actress, and off-screen a private victory. On the set of the movie, she ate her first 2 meals alone. She's also eaten pasta with oil. Her next goal, a sandwich for lunch.
And oil and butter don't terrify you anymore?
No, butter terrifies me. Oil doesn't terrify me. Oil's fine.
How much longer do you think it's going to take before it's really gone?
I don't know. The most honest answer is I don't know.
And if we ask you to have a piece of pizza with us, what would you feel now?
The most honest and realistic answer to you right now is that, yeah, I'm still afraid. But every day I'm less afraid. And I feel the most free that I've felt in a long time. I feel the most healthy I've felt in a long time.
Do you still want to live near your parents?
I want to live near my parents, but for the first time, I see my boyfriend and I buying a house together. And asked me that a year ago, I would have been so scared.
Your trophy is going to be what?
When I eat my piece of wedding cake at my wedding. that'll be my victory. That'll be my absolute rising above it all and saying, I did it.
And now a footnote. Tracy's boyfriend, Robbie, is so convinced she's ready for that piece of cake, he told us that at this moment, after the story airs on the West Coast, he's going to ask Tracy to marry him.
Still ahead, lawmakers and lobbyists. After our report last week, it may no longer be business as usual. And next, adults haunted by childhood memories of abuse and torture.
They would put us in straitjackets. They would tie us onto beds with bars and metal springs.
The painful secrets of the Grey Nuns, when Primetime continues. Primetime continues. Now from Washington, Sam Donaldson.
In Canada, it's known as the era of Great Darkness, and we're now learning just how dark it was. The 1940s and 50s were a time of repression and fear in the French-speaking province of Quebec. The Catholic Church ran virtually everything, from schools to hospitals to institutions. Abortions were taboo, out-of-wedlock babies were taboo, so thousands of children ended up at orphanages operated by the church. John Quinones talked to many of those children, now grown, who say they are no longer willing to hide the horrible truth of what really happened to them.
It seemed like a match made in heaven. Thousands of orphan children hungry for love and affection, warmly embraced by Catholic nuns, the so-called angels of God. The setting, Catholic orphanages in Quebec, Canada, the 1940s. A time when no one questioned the work of nuns, no one ever imagined the dark secrets that lurked behind these walls. In the basement of St. Julien Orphanage, a children's dungeon, complete with torture chamber.
They would put us in straitjackets. They would tie us onto beds with bars and metal springs for weeks at a time.
At St. John of God, a medical laboratory where normal children were declared mentally retarded, injected with experimental drugs, and jolted with electroshock therapy.
They would strap little girls with electrical cords right here, and then they would turn on the electricity. There was a noise, and the girls would lose consciousness.
And at Mont Providence, a kind of sexual playground where priests, nuns, and their assistants, known as monitors, molested young boys.
The head monitor raped me in the cell. The last time was in an elevator.
Charges against the church are now echoing throughout the provincial towns and villages of Quebec. Virtually every week, orphans who had kept silent for decades are coming forth unveiling their darkest secrets. Police are now investigating dozens of allegations against nuns, doctors, and lay workers. Charges that range from sexual abuse to murder.
It all began during the 16-year reign of Maurice Duplessis, Quebec's dictatorial premier. Duplessis was a devout Catholic, a good friend of the church and its bishops. He gave them millions of tax dollars to run the province's welfare system. Quebec's orphanages were turned over to an order of sisters known as the Grey Nuns because of their dark clothing. For each child under their care, the nuns received 75 cents a day from the government. But if those orphans happened to be mentally retarded, they got more than 3 times as much, $2.50 a day. The prospect of that extra money led to a brutal decision. With the stroke of a pen, thousands of healthy orphans were declared mentally retarded.
Kids would go to bed normal or as orphans one night and would wake up as abnormal the next morning just because they were decreed as mentally retarded.
Stan Van Dice is a doctor now investigating the medical histories of the orphans.
We're talking about basically unfortunate children who did not have a mother and a father and a family to take care of them. And what did they do that they would deserve that?
Today we want to defend ourselves. We want to cry out.
PrimeTime gathered 200 of the so-called orphans of Duplessis for a kind of reunion. All of these people were once declared mentally retarded. All say they were victims of abuse.
They would take popsicle sticks and ram them into my ears. It broke my eardrums.
What is that?
From rubbing on steel springs when they were tied up on the bed.
The years of neglect and sexual abuse have also left permanent emotional scars on some 15,000 orphans.
I was raped by a priest at one orphanage, by workers at another orphanage, and 3 more times at a third orphanage. After all that, I never wanted to have children. I thought I would kill the child and then myself.
For both the women and the men, the stigma of mental retardation has led to joblessness, divorce, depression.
You were classified as debilité mentale?
Oh, yes.
Mentally retarded?
Oui, monsieur.
You were too. You were classified as mentally retarded?
Oh, yes.
And you?
Débile certain too.
But were you really? I mean, you obviously...
No, I'm not really.
And none of you are?
It's not true.
Only as adults did they find out they were perfectly normal. Too late, they say, to recover a stolen childhood.
They broke my life. They broke my life.
Her name is Miriam Kelly, now 57. During the 18 years she spent in Catholic orphanages, Miriam says she was frequently bound in a straitjacket and then submerged into cold water baths repeatedly until she almost lost consciousness. She says she was also injected with hallucinogenic drugs and even forced to eat a mouse, all part of the Grey Nun's discipline.
She had a little mouse, dead, and she said, "You're going to eat that." She threw that on my mouth, and me, I vomit.
Miriam agreed to take us back to her old home, the St. Julian Orphanage, her first visit here in over 30 years.
What do you remember?
I remember when they beat me. That was my cell.
Her cell, in the corner there, her worst memory.
Very bad memories, that. I want to jump.
You wanted to jump down from there?
Yes, I want to kill myself, you know.
And then Miriam showed us this. Just across the street from the orphanage, a children's cemetery.
How many do you think were buried here?
I think the 200 orphans.
These are the tiny graves of hundreds of orphans who died during their stay at St. Julian, some of them under mysterious circumstances.
That's a little girl, 7 years old, and she died in 1951.
A child so anonymous, she was named after the institution.
You see her name, Thérèse Julien.
As she ventures inside St. Julian through an open back door, Miriam worries about the orphans who were left behind.
Saint Pauline! J.C. Pauline!
Old friends, like 55-year-old Pauline. The last time the two women saw each other, they were young girls. It was 1959, when a long-lost sister finally gained Miriam's release. No one ever came by for Pauline.
Was Pauline mentally retarded 30 years ago?
No, she was not retarded. She was normal.
What happened?
She had too much the electroshock.
But as it turns out, Pauline may have been one of the luckier orphans. Miriam says she saw Grey Nuns viciously beating this unidentified 5-year-old girl the night before she died.
They beat that little girl, and she died in the morning.
This little girl here was killed by the nuns?
I think she killed the little girl.
We try to talk to one of the nuns Miriam holds responsible for the atrocities. She's 72 years old now, living in this convent in Quebec City.
We're with American television.
She refused to meet with us in person, though we were able to talk to her by telephone.
My name is John Quinones. I'm an American journalist. Why do you think these people are making such serious charges.
Je ne sais pas, parce que moi, je n'ai rien fait. J'ai essayé de faire que du bien.
There's no mystery, she said, to the death of that 5-year-old girl.
Was she beaten?
Non, non. Elle est morte de pneumonie.
The orphan's charges, she said, were highly exaggerated.
Beaucoup. Beaucoup exagéré. Il y a eu des choses, t'as pris des petites tapes, puis tu as fait de même. On mettait des gilets, bien, je n'ai pas d'excuses à faire.
It's been 30 years now, but many of the orphans still suffer from nightmares of the abuse. To this day, Elise Canton sleeps as if strapped in a straitjacket.
We have after effects. We were left with trauma. No help from anybody. Our lives were destroyed.
The Catholic Church, which today remains extremely influential in Quebec, is stunned by the charges.
I can understand that.
Sister Giselle Fortier is a spokeswoman for 7 orders of Catholic nuns, including the Grey Nuns.
I know those sisters, and I know that they were very dedicated to their person.
But sister, these orphans were shocked with electricity, beaten with chains, tied to beds for weeks. How far did this discipline go?
It was a situation, it's an allegation that is upsetting myself.
You're not denying that there was some mistreatment of these children?
It may happen that a person sometimes has a bad attitude for them.
These children believed in priests and nuns, in God and the church. They trusted you, and you let them down. You don't feel you should give them an apology?
At this moment, we are not ready to recognize that we have done something bad in the past.
I'd love to see those damn pigs, to tell them all the pain they caused us, all the sorrow they caused in our lives, all that we lost because of them. We lost everything.
The stigma of retardation, unemployment, divorce, depression. It's little wonder that today many of the orphans have turned away from the church and the Catholic nuns once entrusted to protect them.
They knew what they were doing to us. They knew the harm they were causing us. They did it knowingly and joyfully. They hurt our bodies. They hurt our souls. They hurt our minds.
A $1.2 billion suit has been filed on behalf of thousands of orphans. They're asking not only for money, but for a public apology from the church. The Catholic Church is conducting its own investigation into the allegations, as are the Quebec Provincial Police. So far, no criminal charges have been filed.
Primetime continues after this from our ABC stations.
Now for an update on our story, Still Business as Usual. Last week, we showed you how 10 members of the House spent 4 days at a Florida resort as guests of the electronics industry, attending an industry legislative conference. Their hosts, the Electronic Industries Association, paid for their airfare, their rooms, their meals, even their greens fees. And when our chief correspondent, Chris Wallace, asked Association President Pete McCloskey about it, McCloskey was quite open as to the reasons for such generosity.
I don't make any bones about the fact that we're trying to get our message across to members of Congress.
For their part, the congressional guests hotly denied that they had in any way compromised their impartiality or integrity.
So you can accept airfare, hotels, greens fees, dinners, and you don't feel any sense of debt, any sense of being beholden?
None whatsoever.
But to some members of Congress, such cozy relationships are troubling. Yesterday, Minnesota Democratic Senator Paul Wellstone introduced an amendment requiring more extensive public disclosure of such gifts.
It's a bad thing for the institution to have lobbyists with this amount of power granting these financial favors and not having us disclose that. It has to be done. It's time.
Wellstone would require lobbyists to report gifts of $20 or more, or when smaller amounts given to any individual total $50 in any 1 year. And in somewhat of a surprise, it was time. The Senate approved Wellstone's amendment, and today passed the bill 95-2.
I think you'll see fewer trips to sunny resorts. I think you'll see fewer people going out to dinner. I think you'll see fewer of these gifts exchanged, and I think that's all for the better.
Better still, perhaps, is New Jersey Senator Frank Lautenberg's bill, which would ban gifts over $20 outright. The Senate has yet to vote on that one. Meanwhile, over in the House, the body whose members went down to Florida courtesy of the electronics industry, the pressure for change is building. But so far, there's been no vote on anything. Primetime continues in a moment.
Judd Rose has met a lot of formidable women in his life, from politicians to athletes to film stars. But as far as we know, this is his first love letter on the air. He decided to send it to a woman who hosts a daily radio talk show on a public broadcasting station in Chicago. A woman he was thinking of this week because, why don't we let him tell you?
United States allies are split on arms for Bosnia. Violence in the Mideast. No headway in the Yugoslavian situation. Is America going out of control?
In Chicago, I don't think there is any show that has the in-depth coverage that she does.
I'm going to ask you some, controversial questions, but that's what it's about.
She was interviewing like somebody from Iran or Iraq, but she doesn't take any gruff from anybody. And obviously she was making the person kind of nervous. And I just got done with the patient. I said, do you think I make you nervous?
There are a lot of people who say that Italy should be North and South Italy.
Well, listening to her, she's a beautiful person. I don't know what her stats are or vital statistics are. A rather slender lady. I would say perhaps kind of 30-ish. That's how I picture her.
Well, guess again. Sandra Gare is not 30-ish. All she'll admit to is her 60s. And at 5'2", she's not exactly an imposing presence.
Morning,
In fact, she sits on a phone book to reach her desk.
See? It's just right. And then as they wear out, I throw them away.
As for smarts, she can recall the most obscure details of the Bosnian peace plan. But she needs help remembering where she's having lunch.
I pinned a note on my jacket saying where we're supposed to be at 2 o'clock.
So what can we say about Sandra Gare? That she's briskly efficient?
Isn't this a great way to do an interview?
You don't come across as sort of like the tough interrogator that you certainly sound like on the air sometimes. Wouldn't you say you're kind of an unlikely person to fill this role?
I never think of myself as tough. In fact, I always think that someone's going to punch me in the nose over the air, over the phone.
I mean, you never yell at people on the air.
When people start screaming at one another, if they start getting really nasty, I really, it's almost like a mother. I say, now listen, calm down, just calm down.
You shouldn't have said that.
May I butt in? Okay, I do want to say that I really never look for confrontation on this program.
Right.
I prefer to have conversation, even if it's heated.
In a medium dominated by the rantings of Rush Limbaugh and the ravings of Howard Stern, it's hard to believe thoughtful discussion of world events has an audience. But it does. Rick Kogan, media critic of the Chicago Tribune, calls Sandra Gare a civic icon.
I think that in the same way, and this is a very diverse crowd, that Michael Jordan, Studs Terkel, Irv Kupcinet, and a few others, who shall go nameless, provide a service to Chicago like the skyline that Chicagoans cannot and should not be without.
Of course, even an icon needs to eat. Sandra's day starts at dawn when she heads down the block to her favorite greasy spoon where she clips the morning papers. Getting midday on the air is a no-frills operation. There's no car waiting, just the number 22 bus, which takes her downtown to the offices of WBEZ. There's no staff waiting either, just her director. So she works the phones, booking guests for future shows.
This is Sandra Gare calling Nizar Hamdoun. Sandra Gare, he knows who I am. What happened with Adams in France on the BCCI? Now, is Roy available, or he's not in jail again, is he?
WBEZ is no media heavyweight, just an FM public radio station with a relatively small audience. So it's surprising how many big names Sandra gets. On this day, her first guest is the Iraqi ambassador.
I've been keeping a very low profile, but I could not
I know
Put down a friend like you, Rick.
Polite, but to the point, she grills the Iraqi on not allowing UN inspections.
Since your country lost the war.
Then she makes a little news, interviewing Palestinian spokeswoman Hanan Ashrawi.
Is it possible, after a long struggle, the Palestinians and the Israelis are going to help one another, perhaps against other nations?
Oh, I think that's true, yes. The conditions are...
I really was surprised at her answer. I didn't think she'd say yes.
And finally, face-to-face with former National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski.
Coercive utopia cannot be imposed.
This is, let's face it, kind of highbrow stuff compared to your average radio program or average TV program. Are you an intellectual?
I wish I were. I mean, people think I am.
Intellectual or not, say this about Sandra Gair. She's come a long way from where she began. Her childhood dream was to be on the radio, but as an actress. Rose Gair is her mother.
She was always acting. She started talking when she was 1 year old. She knew everybody's telephone number. If I didn't remember the phone number, I would ask her. She seemed to remember it all. And she was amazing. She was unbelievable.
By the time she was 19, Sandra was starring in national radio hits like Meet Miss Sherlock, Sky King, and Today's Children.
Stand by, please.
Christopher, you're just as guilty of murdering Susan Rose as if you'd held the pistol and pulled the trigger. If you had listened to me, this would never have happened.
Sandra was a familiar voice to radio fans throughout the 40s and 50s. But in the early 60s, her 13-year marriage ended in divorce. Left to raise 3 small children alone, her acting career came to a sudden stop.
I admit that I suffered a great deal for quite a few years.
Tell me about some of the things that were difficult for you.
When you're on your own and you have no one to share decisions with, or if someone's ill, you know, and you're alone and worried, I don't know how else to describe it. It's just very difficult. I'm going to cry.
Money was always tight, so Sandra took whatever work she could find.
I had to support my kids, didn't I? I got a waitress job to earn some money, and I wore a uniform. And, of course, my kids thought it was wonderful. I used to bring their friends in after school, and I'd give them Cokes. And then I got a job in a gallery. And my children were very upset because they felt that I had come down in status. I wasn't wearing a uniform anymore.
By the early 70s, with her children grown, Sandra decided to give broadcasting one more try. She got a job at WBEZ, where she was an immediate hit, doing everything from film reviews to celebrity interviews. Then she was offered 2 hours a day to do anything she wanted. And what she wanted was a show devoted to international news.
When I was saying goodbye to you, told you, please try for peace. And then all hell broke loose. I really take a lot of these things that happen in the world to heart.
Is there anything you can recall that you took very personally?
I've seen cruelty in Central America and a lot of poverty in other countries. And it's unbearable because I think I react as a mother, first of all, more than anything else. And I always feel that people have no right to be treated so badly.
She reacts like a mother. And you'll recall earlier she said that when guests get out of hand, she yells like a mother. So think of Sandra Gair as the mother of all talk show hosts. Her listeners do.
She really sounds like the Earth Mother of radio. You know, after you had a traumatic accident or you woke up from surgery, you'd like to have Sandra talking to you.
You have worked virtually your entire life.
Yeah.
Has your career been the most important thing in your life, do you think?
Not at all. My priority is my family. Always has been.
Really?
Mm-hmm. My children I'm talking about.
You have a daughter who lives in England.
Yes.
You have a son who's an actor in Hollywood.
Yes.
And you have another son who is, like you, a journalist.
Yes.
Any thoughts on him?
He always thinks he's right.
Mom!
Sweetheart.
That's right. Sandra Gair is my mother.
She loves me.
I love you.
I just said for the interview you might want to dress in sort of a spiffy way.
I thought you meant that you want at the studio all the time.
That's the way you wanted her. Oh.
Can you believe this? After am I coming here every day with stockings on?
I just didn't want you to dress like a slob. Then.
When do I dress like a slob?
It's okay. I tried to show Mom how to dress for the camera, but then she showed me undressed for the camera.
This is Judd When he was 6 months old, he took his first bath.
As you may have guessed, she is, first and always, a proud mom. She says the best days of her life were the days each of us was born.
In the interest of truth and credibility and fairness, I mean, you're a journalist, I'm a journalist. So let me ask you, which of your 3 children do you love the most?
Certainly not you.
In fact, my mom has never played favorites. When she comes back from trips, she even gives each of us the exact same gift. It's been like that with everything she's given us.
What do you think the most important thing is that you've given to us?
A sense of being loved, knowing that you were loved. And accepted. The way you are. The way you are.
How do you say thanks for that gift? Well, this Sunday, many of you will try to find a way. As for me, I'll just say this. The word hero is thrown around pretty loosely these days. Seems like every athlete who wins the big game is called a hero just for doing what he's paid to do. Used to be, it was reserved for those who did something special, who responded to adversity with dignity and guts and grace. Truth is, you can count yourself lucky in this life if you know even one real hero. I do.
And so to Judd's hero and mine at home in Louisville and all those other heroes out there, happy Mother's Day.
Here's a preview of some of the stories we'll have for you next week. Thousands of children left behind by their American fathers, U.S. servicemen who say they were just out for a good time.
The only things that there were to do was to get drunk, raise hell, and be with women.
How the Navy promoted prostitution in the Philippines.
You were purchased by an American soldier for 2 months for $32.
Good.
Leaving a legacy of pain and tears. Also, talk show host Sally Jesse Raphael on her nearly impossible rise to the top.
18 times you were fired from 24 separate jobs.
Mm-hmm.
On her weird and wildly successful show.
And how many of the topics embarrass you?
And for the first time, on the terror and heartbreak in the moment every parent dreads.
The phone rang, and he said, Allison's dead. I said, Allison's dead.
That's next week on PrimeTime.
Don't forget Nightline later tonight, 2020 tomorrow night. I'm Diane Sawyer. Good night, Sam.
Good night, Diane. I'm Sam Donaldson in Washington. Don't forget Day One on Sunday, and join us again next Thursday evening for another edition of PrimeTime Live.
This has been ABC News.
This is ABC.